Do you ever feel like your sales questions are hitting a dead end? You ask a question, they answer yes or no, and then the conversation goes nowhere. Well, what if there was a formula to ask questions that get your customer talking and expose their real needs? Well, that's exactly the code that we're going to crack in this video. Let's break down the L.E.T.S framework, L-E.T.S, and I'm going to explain why this is a massively powerful tool to both understand your customers, but more importantly, to close more deals. Before we get into the L.E.T.S process, let's quickly talk about question structure. So questions can either be open-ended or close-ended. Open-ended questions are like opening a gate, inviting in a flood of thoughts, of ideas. Whilst close-ended questions are like hitting a stop sign. You're only ever going to get a simple yes or a no. And both are really important in sales. We often rely on those yes or no questions to get a definitive answer. They're easy, but they often limit salespeople's understanding of their real buyer's needs. The key is knowing when to use closed-ended questions and when to switch to open-ended ones. Imagine this, let's say you're negotiating a promotion with someone. A closed-ended question might go like, would you be happy with a promotion? It's very specific, it's a yes or no answer. But an open-ended question would be, what would an ideal career move look like for you? This gets you way more valuable information and allows you to negotiate at a much higher, much more sophisticated level. Think of open-ended conversations as conversation starters that uncover the needs of the buyer, whilst close-ended questions help confirm details that you've made a hypothesis about, and they also push a conversation forward. We're going to use both types of questions strategically in the L.E.T.S framework. So with that in mind, let's break down the steps of this proven framework where each question should lie within your questioning, within a conversation. And of course, this specific order is designed to take us closer to getting that next step of the sales process agreed and committed to by the prospect. The first step of the process is to ask logical questions. Think of these questions as getting down to business. These questions help you understand the specifics of what the customer wants to achieve. They're like gathering intel with the what and the how of the situation. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're selling a new marketing tool. A good logical question to ask might be, who else on your team would need to be on board to use this new system effectively? This helps you understand who else has a say in the decision-making process and how your product is going to fit into their workflow. We can also use logical questions in a close-ended fashion to confirm specifics from the buyer. So for instance, we might ask, do we need to get the marketing director involved to make this decision on this tool? So do you see here how we've nudged the buyer towards a specific direction by using a closed-ended question? And this really helps us clarify things, whereas an open-ended logical question allows the buyer to tell us what we don't already know. These logical questions set the stage for the next step of the process, which is all about emotions. And we're going to dive into that in a minute. But for now, focus on getting those clear, fact-based questions at the beginning of each of your sales calls, diagnosis calls, follow-up calls, closing conversations. Get the logical questions in first. They're going to help you understand the customer's situation and they're going to pave the way for a more emotional connection. All right, sellers, you've got those logical questions down. Now it's time to add a little bit of feeling to the mix. We're going to move on to emotional questions. These questions dig into the why behind your customer's needs. In the first part of the process, we talked about the what and the how with logical questions, but here we want to understand what is the motivation behind solving this problem. So imagine you're selling a project management tool. A great emotional question might be, hey, well, if this new system helps streamline your projects, what would that mean for you? This gets the buyer thinking beyond features and benefits, and it focuses the conversation on the positive impact it's going to have on their work life. Now, some people that you engage with, they might not quite see the emotional benefit of working with you just quite yet. That is where we're going to use a close-ended variant on this emotional question. So you might ask, would getting this project management system implemented finally eliminate some of the stress that you're feeling managing all of your deadlines? So do you see here how we've nudged the buyer towards a specific outcome, and we're trying to clarify the emotional connection to solving that problem? This is so powerful, because to close any deal, you've got to nail the logical arguments of getting the deal done, but you've also got to nail the emotional side of things as well. Chris Smith made reference to emotions in the sales process in a recent episode of the Salesman podcast.
The science of sales, and it's the simplest drawing, but that's why it's so easy to remember. It's literally, your job is to get people more emotionally excited than the cost during the time you have their attention.
These emotional questions help you connect with the customer on a deeper level, and it shows them how your product can truly help them improve their situation. Next up, we're going to explore trigger event questions, and these help pinpoint a very specific moment where the buyer's problem is going to become most urgent and they're going to want to take action to solve it. Okay, so we've been diving into the what and then the why with logical and emotional questions. Now let's get specific about the when that we want to solve this problem with trigger event questions. Now, these questions connect the buyer's emotions to a specific moment in time, a specific event that makes solving their problems now urgent. It goes from a nice to have to a must have. So let's imagine that you're selling cybersecurity software. A good trigger event question might be, well, what's changed in your company's security needs since that recent data breach? This ties the emotional concern about the security of the organization and that person's job security on top of that to a real world event that's going to make them more receptive to getting started right now. We can also use a close-ended trigger event question to pinpoint this specific moment of impact. For example, we might ask, did the recent data breach affect your company's ability to meet its quarterly earning goals? So do you see how that gets them thinking about specific consequences of not addressing the problem, and we put a time frame in place as well. Again, just to drill down on this point, this is the best way that I know to think about trigger event questions. It turns solutions from a nice to have someday into a pressing need to resolve that issue right now. They start to light a fire under your customer, and it makes them way more likely to take action. And of course, you can have as many prospecting, discovery, and follow-up calls as you like. If the buyer doesn't take action, make a purchase, it's all been an absolute waste of your time, of company resources, and the prospect's time as well. Coming up next, we're going to explore what we call summary questions, and these are going to help solidify your understanding of the buyer's situation. So stay tuned. Right, so we're almost there, sellers. We've covered a lot of ground with logical, emotional, and trigger event questions. Now let's wrap all this up with our summary questions. So think of these as a way of tying a nice little bow on the conversation thus far and creating a clear, memorable takeaway for the customer. We want to summarize the situation that you've uncovered and show them that you've addressed and you've understood their challenges. So here's an example. Let's say you're selling marketing automation software. A good summary question might go like, so it sounds like you're struggling to keep up with all of the manual marketing tasks, which is then impacting your team's efficiency. I see this a lot, and it can definitely lead to burnout in a role like yours. Does that sound about right? And this style of summary question reminds them of the key points that they kind of discussed and brought up with you, and it shows that you're both on the same page. And of course, you know what's coming at this point in the video. We can also use a close-ended summary question to highlight this urgency as well. So you could ask, for instance, if you don't find a way to automate these tasks, could it put your team's ability to meet its marketing goals at risk? So do you see how that reinforces the potential consequences of inaction from the buyer? And to understand why the summary is important, you need to hear what Andy Paul said on another episode of the Salesman podcast.
If you want to summarize what a buyer is trying to achieve, is they're trying to quickly gather information to make a good decision with the least investment of time and effort possible. And they're not trying to make, most companies aren't trying to make the best decision. They're trying to make a good enough decision. And there's been a tremendous amount of research done on this. People won Nobel Prizes based on this. They're trying to make a good enough decision.
Summary questions solidify your understanding from the facilitator of the deal. They build trust with the customer, the prospect, and they create a clear path forward. And all you need to do, once you pass the diagnosis part of the sales process, all you need to do is implement these L.E.T.S questions on every single follow-up call, and you're going to close way more deals on the back of it. So there we have it. If you enjoyed this video, why not click the video that's on the screen right now and continue making selling simple.